I should have known something was wrong when Elena started wearing perfume to bed. My name is Alex Mercer, and I've spent the last 15 years behind a camera lens, first documenting crime scenes for the Portland Police Department, then transitioning to wedding photography when the nightmares got too frequent. You learn to read people when you've seen them at their absolute worst, or in my current profession, their absolute best. The tells are always there if you know where to look. Elena had tells, lots of them. Tonight was her big night, the gallery opening she'd been planning for 6 months. Fractured Perspectives, a study in modern vulnerability, featuring local artists exploring themes of betrayal and trust. The irony wasn't lost on me, though I kept that observation to myself as I adjusted my tie in our bedroom mirror. "Alex, have you seen my silver earrings?" Elena called from the bathroom, her voice carrying that particular strain it got when she was nervous, or lying. After 12 years of marriage, the two had started sounding remarkably similar. "Check your jewelry box," I replied, watching her reflection in the mirror. She was wearing the black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, the one she'd claimed was too formal when I'd suggested she wear it to dinner. Apparently, it was perfect for impressing her creative collaborator. Victor Lane. Even his name sounded pretentious. I'd first heard about Victor 3 months ago, when Elena started working late at the gallery with increasing frequency. "He's helping me curate the exhibition," she'd explained, her eyes not quite meeting mine. "He has such an interesting perspective on modern art." What he had, from what I'd observed during our brief introduction last week, was wandering hands and the kind of practiced charm that made my photographer's instincts scream fraud. But Elena seemed enchanted by his artistic vision and his ability to really understand her creative soul. The fact that he texted her at all hours of the night was just professional dedication, apparently. "Found them!" Elena emerged from the bathroom, silver earrings catching the light. She looked beautiful, she always did, but there was something different about the way she carried herself now. More confident, more secretive, like she had a delicious secret she was dying to share with everyone except her husband. "You look stunning," I said, and meant it. Whatever else was happening, Elena was still the woman I'd fallen in love with at a coffee shop in the Arts District 12 years ago. She'd been arguing with the barista about the difference between a cappuccino and a latte with the passionate intensity most people reserved for politics or religion. She smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from her in weeks. "Thank you. I'm nervous." "About the opening?" "About everything." She paused, studying her reflection. "Alex, after tonight, things might be different." I felt that familiar chill that used to hit me at crime scenes, the moment when all the evidence clicked into place and revealed something ugly underneath the surface. Different how?" But she was already moving toward the door, grabbing her purse and the gallery keys. "We should go. People will start arriving soon, and I want to make sure everything's perfect." The gallery was in downtown Portland's Arts District, a converted warehouse space with exposed brick walls and industrial lighting that Elena had spent 2 years transforming into something sophisticated. Tonight, it was filled with her carefully curated collection of local artists' work, each piece exploring themes of deception and revelation. Victor was already there when we arrived, standing in front of a massive canvas that depicted a dinner table with empty chairs, painted in shades of gray and black. He was exactly what Central Casting would order for a pretentious artist. Black turtleneck, expensive jeans, and the kind of deliberately messy hair that required more product than Elena used. "Elena." He moved toward us with the fluid grace of someone very aware of his own attractiveness. "Everything looks perfect. You've outdone yourself." The way he said her name, like he was tasting something sweet, made my jaw clench. But I smiled and extended my hand. "Victor, good to see you again." His handshake was firm but brief, his attention already returning to Elena. "I was just admiring the centerpiece. The way you positioned it catches the light perfectly." I studied the painting while they discussed lighting and spatial dynamics. The empty dinner table was surrounded by shadows that might have been people or might have been ghosts. The artist had captured something unsettling about the space between chairs, the suggestion of conversations that had ended badly. "It's called The Last Supper," Victor explained, noticing my interest. "The artist wanted to explore the moment when trust dies." "Interesting timing," I murmured, but they were already moving on to the next piece. The opening was a success by any measure. Elena glided through the crowd of art enthusiasts, collectors, and local celebrities with the confidence of someone in her element. I hung back, camera in hand, documenting the evening while observing the social dynamics. Victor never strayed far from Elena's side. They moved through the space like dance partners who'd rehearsed their steps, finishing each other's sentences when discussing the artwork, sharing private smiles when they thought no one was watching. But I was always watching. It's what I do. I noticed how Victor's wife, Jasmine, stood apart from the group, nursing a glass of wine and checking her phone with increasing frequency. She was prettier than her husband deserved. Sharp cheekbones, intelligent dark eyes, and the kind of understated elegance that didn't need expensive clothes to make an impression. She also looked miserable. "Great turnout," said Sophie, Elena's assistant and closest friend at the gallery. She appeared at my elbow with a glass of wine and a gossip-hungry expression. "Elena must be thrilled." "She seems to be enjoying herself," I agreed, watching my wife laugh at something Victor had whispered in her ear. "They make a good team," Sophie continued, apparently oblivious to the minefield she was wandering into. "The way they collaborate is just electric. You can feel the creative energy between them." "I'm sure you can." Sophie shot me a sharp look, finally picking up on the edge in my voice. "I just meant professionally, of course." "Of course." The evening progressed with speeches, wine, and the kind of art world small talk that made my teeth itch. I dutifully played the supportive husband, taking photos and making conversation with Elena's colleagues while mentally cataloging every interaction between my wife and her creative collaborator. By 9 o'clock, most of the crowd had moved on to the after-party at Rosario's, an upscale Italian restaurant a few blocks away. Elena had reserved a large table for her inner circle, gallery staff, a few artists, and select friends, including Victor and Jasmine. The restaurant was dimly lit, all warm wood and flickering candles. Elena had positioned herself at the head of the table with Victor to her right and me to her left. Jasmine sat directly across from Victor, her expression growing more strained as the evening progressed. "I'd like to propose a toast," Elena announced after we'd ordered, raising her wine glass, "to new collaborations and the courage to pursue authentic artistic expression." Victor raised his glass, his eyes locked on Elena's, to finding the perfect creative partner. The toast felt like a performance, rehearsed and loaded with subtext that everyone at the table could sense but no one wanted to acknowledge. I raised my glass with the rest of them, noting how Jasmine's hand trembled slightly as she drank. "So Victor," said Marcus, one of the gallery's board members, "Elena tells us you're working on something new together. A joint project?" "We're exploring some exciting possibilities," Victor replied, his hand briefly touching Elena's on the table. "When two artists find that kind of creative synchronicity, you have to follow where it leads." "Even if it leads somewhere unexpected," Elena added, her cheeks flushed from wine and excitement. I set down my glass and leaned back in my chair, studying the two of them with the same analytical eye I'd once used to reconstruct crime scenes. The body language was unmistakable, the way they angled toward each other, the synchronized breathing, the micro-expressions that spoke of shared secrets. "It must be inspiring," I said conversationally, "working so closely together. All those late-night brainstorming sessions." Elena's smile flickered for just a moment. "Creative work doesn't follow a schedule." "No, I imagine it doesn't." I turned to Victor with genuine curiosity. "Tell me, do you always text your creative partners after midnight, or is Elena special?" The table went completely silent. Victor's wine glass stopped halfway to his lips. Elena's face went pale, then flushed red. Jasmine's fork clattered against her plate as she set it down with shaking hands. "I'm sorry?" Victor managed, his voice carefully controlled. "The texts," I clarified helpfully. "Elena's phone has been buzzing with messages from you at all hours. Last night it was 12:47 a.m., if I remember correctly. Something about inspiration striking and needing to capture the moment. I just wondered if that was normal for artistic collaborations." 7 people stopped eating simultaneously. The silence stretched like a taut wire, vibrating with tension. Jasmine slowly turned to look at her husband, her dark eyes reflecting the candlelight like chips of obsidian. "Victor? It's not—" Victor started, then stopped, apparently realizing that any explanation would only dig the hole deeper. Elena found her voice first. "Alex, this isn't the time or place—" "For honesty," I interrupted, my voice still perfectly pleasant. "I disagree. I think it's exactly the right time." I looked around the table at the frozen faces. "After all, we're all friends here, aren't we?" Jasmine reached across the table and plucked Victor's phone from beside his plate. Her movements were precise, controlled, like a surgeon making an incision. "Jasmine, don't—" Victor lunged for the device, but she was already swiping through his messages. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the restaurant's ambient noise, other diners' conversations, clinking silverware, the soft jazz playing overhead, but at our table, no one breathed. Jasmine's face went through a series of expressions as she scrolled: confusion, realization, hurt, and finally, cold fury. She looked up at Victor, then at Elena, then back at the phone. 6 months, she said quietly. 6 months of working late and artistic inspiration and creative breakthroughs. She set the phone down gently and stood up. I hope it was worth it. She walked away without another word, leaving her coat, her purse, and her marriage behind. Victor started to follow her, then stopped, looking back at Elena with an expression of panic. "Elena, Don't," Elena hissed, her composure finally cracking. "Just don't." She turned to me, her eyes blazing with a mixture of humiliation and rage. "Are you satisfied? Was destroying my career worth proving your point?" I considered the question seriously, taking a sip of wine while the rest of the table sat in stunned silence. "You know what, Elena? The night's still young. Let's see how it plays out." I stood up, dropped my napkin on the table, and walked away, leaving my wife to explain to her colleagues why her marriage had just imploded in front of them. The show, as they say, was just getting started. The next morning, I woke up alone for the first time in 12 years. Elena hadn't come home, which wasn't surprising given how our evening had ended. I'd found a text on my phone at 2:17 a.m. "Staying at Sophie's tonight. We need to talk tomorrow." What we needed was a good divorce attorney, but I suppose that conversation could wait until I'd had coffee. I padded downstairs to the kitchen, noting the absence of Elena's morning routine. No NPR playing softly on the radio, no organic fair trade coffee brewing, no Greek yogurt and granola arranged in perfectly Instagram-worthy bowls, just silence and the lingering scent of her perfume. My phone rang while I was contemplating the existential emptiness of my bachelor breakfast. The caller ID showed Owen Martinez, my old college roommate who now ran a data recovery service downtown. "Dude," Owen's voice crackled through the speaker, "please tell me you didn't actually blow up your marriage at Rosario's last night. News travels fast. Sophie's been texting her entire contact list since midnight. According to her, you went full psycho and accused Elena of cheating in front of half the Portland art scene." I settled into my favorite chair with my coffee, looking out at the garden Elena had spent 3 years cultivating. I didn't accuse her of anything, I just asked an innocent question about text messaging habits. "Right. And how's that working out for you?" "Well, I'm drinking coffee alone while my wife hides at her friend's house, so I'd say it's going exactly as planned." Owen was quiet for a moment. "You want to talk about it? And by talk, I mean, do you need me to recover anything from any electronic devices that might hypothetically contain evidence of anything?" This was why I'd stayed friends with Owen for 20 years. He was the kind of guy who would help you move a body without asking questions, then suggest the best place to get tacos afterward. "Hypothetically," I said, "if someone wanted to recover deleted text messages from an iPhone that backs up to iCloud, how would one go about that?" Hypothetically, one would need access to the iCloud account and a basic understanding of how Apple's backup system works. Also hypothetically, one might want to be very careful about the legal implications of accessing someone else's private communications. What if it's a shared account, married couple, family plan, that sort of thing? Then, hypothetically, both parties have legal access to the account, hypothetically speaking. I smiled for the first time in 12 hours. "Want to grab lunch? I might have a hypothetical project for you. I'll bring my laptop." Owen's shop was located in a strip mall between a Thai restaurant and a tax preparation service, which seemed appropriate for a business that specialized in recovering things people thought were lost forever. The front office was cramped and cluttered, filled with towers of defunct computers and the electronic detritus of the digital age. "Marriage troubles?" Owen asked as he led me to his back office, which looked like mission control for a small space program. "You could say that." I pulled out Elena's old iPad, which she'd stopped using when she upgraded to the latest model 6 months ago. "This is connected to our shared iCloud account. Elena's been deleting her text conversations, but I'm betting they're still in the backup files." Owen took the device and plugged it into one of his computers. "You sure you want to do this? Sometimes ignorance really is bliss." "I spent 5 years looking at crime scenes, Owen. I've seen what happens when people ignore the evidence." "Fair enough." His fingers flew across the keyboard, windows opening and closing on his monitors. "Okay, I'm seeing the backup files. Looks like she's been pretty thorough about deleting conversations, but..." He paused, frowning at the screen. "That's interesting." "What?" "She deleted the conversations, but she didn't delete the media files. Photos, videos, that sort of thing. They're stored separately in the backup." More typing. "And she definitely didn't think about metadata." Owen pulled up a folder full of image files, each one tagged with detailed information about when and where it was taken. Every photo has XIF data, timestamps, GPS coordinates, device information. It's like a digital fingerprint. He clicked on a photo that made my stomach clench. Elena and Victor in what appeared to be the gallery's back office, sharing a bottle of wine. The timestamp read 11:43 p.m., 3 weeks ago. That was a Thursday, I said quietly. She told me she was having dinner with her mother. Owen pulled up another image. Same location, different date. Then another, and another. A timeline of deception stretching back 6 months, documented in pixels and metadata. There's more, Owen said gently. Video files. I held up a hand. I don't need to see those. But can you compile everything? Timestamps, locations, the works? Already on it. He was typing again, his expression sympathetic. Alex, I'm sorry. This sucks. Yeah, it does. I watched the data compile on his screen, feeling strangely detached from the evidence of my marriage's destruction. But at least now, I know exactly what I'm dealing with. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Jasmine Lane. Can we talk? I showed Owen the message. He raised an eyebrow. The wife? The wife. That could get interesting. I typed back, Barb's Tavern on Morrison, 6 p.m. Her response was immediate. I'll be there. Barb's Tavern was the kind of dive bar that looked exactly the same as it had in 1987, which was either charming or depressing, depending on your mood. Tonight, I was leaning toward charming. The dim lighting and worn wooden booths provided the perfect atmosphere for conspiracy and revenge plotting. Jasmine arrived exactly at 6, looking like she hadn't slept much either. She'd traded her gallery opening outfit for jeans and a sweater, but she still carried herself with that understated elegance that made Victor's betrayal seem even more inexcusable. Thank you for coming, she said as she slid into the booth across from me. I wasn't sure you would. Misery loves company, I replied, signaling Barb for 2 beers. Plus, I figure we have some things to discuss. Barb Morrison had owned the tavern for 15 years and had the kind of no-nonsense attitude that came from dealing with drunk customers and broken dreams on a nightly basis. She brought over 2 bottles of local IPA and studied Jasmine with professional interest. You're new, Barb observed, and you look like someone pissed in your cereal. My husband's been having an affair, Jasmine said matter-of-factly. With my wife? I added. Barb nodded, as if this was completely normal dinner conversation. Well, that explains the atmosphere. First round's on the house, a cheating spouse discount. When she'd gone back to the bar, Jasmine took a long pull from her beer and fixed me with those intelligent dark eyes. So what's the plan? Plan? You didn't expose them at dinner last night just for the satisfaction of watching them squirm. You're too calculated for that. You've got something in mind. I was beginning to understand why Victor had married this woman. She was sharp, direct, and apparently not inclined toward dramatic emotional breakdowns. What makes you think I have a plan? Because you're a photographer with a background in crime scene investigation and you just spent the day with a data recovery specialist. She smiled grimly. I may be heartbroken, but I'm not stupid. You've been gathering evidence. I studied her for a moment, then made a decision. What do you know about Victor's finances? Everything. I handle our books. Her expression darkened. Why? Elena's been paying for things. Dinners, hotel rooms, that new camera equipment he bought last month. I've been tracking the credit card statements. Jasmine set down her beer with a sharp click. That bastard told me he got a new client, said he was finally turning the corner professionally. When did this new client supposedly start paying him? 6 months ago. Her face went pale as the timeline clicked into place. Oh my God, she's been paying him. She's been paying him to sleep with her. It gets worse. I pulled out my phone and showed her one of Owen's metadata reports. They've been using the gallery after hours. Elena has keys, obviously, and the security system logs show them there together at least twice a week. Jasmine studied the data, her expression growing colder by the minute. He told me he was working on a new series, said he needed space to focus, so I shouldn't wait up when he was having creative breakthroughs. Creative breakthroughs, that's one way to put it. She looked up from the phone, and I saw something dangerous flicker in her eyes. I want to destroy them both. That's a coincidence, I said, raising my beer in a mock toast. So do I. We spent the next 2 hours planning. Jasmine, it turned out, was a social media manager with a background in marketing, which meant she understood how to destroy someone's reputation in the digital age. Combined with my evidence-gathering skills and Owen's technical expertise, we had the makings of a very effective revenge operation. The key is coordination, Jasmine explained, sketching out a timeline on a napkin. We hit them simultaneously from multiple angles: legal, financial, social, professional. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late to minimize the damage. You've thought about this before, I observed. I've been planning my escape route since the day I married him, she admitted. I just didn't expect to need it this soon. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "We need to talk. Can you come home?" I showed Jasmine the message. She smiled, and it wasn't a particularly nice expression. "Tell her you'll be there in an hour," she suggested. "That'll give me time to get home and confront Victor with what we know. If we time it right, they'll both be panicking at exactly the same moment." "I like the way you think." "Just remember," she said as we prepared to leave, "this isn't about getting them back together or saving our marriages. This is about making sure they pay for what they've done." I watched her walk to her car, noting the determined set of her shoulders. Victor Lane had made a serious mistake when he'd chosen to betray this woman. But then again, so had Elena when she'd decided to betray me. Time to see how they handled the consequences. Elena was waiting in our living room when I got home, perched on the edge of the couch like a bird ready to take flight. She'd changed out of her gallery clothes into yoga pants and one of my old college sweatshirts, which I recognized as a calculated move designed to remind me of happier times. "Thank you for coming," she said as I hung my jacket in the closet. "I know last night was difficult." "Difficult," I repeated the word, tasting its inadequacy. That's an interesting way to describe watching my marriage implode in public. She flinched but held her ground. "I deserve that. But Alex, we need to talk about what happens next." I settled into my favorite chair, the one I'd been sitting in that morning when Owen called, and studied my wife's face. Even stressed and sleep-deprived, she was beautiful. But there was something different about her now, something harder around the edges. "I'm listening." Elena took a deep breath, clearly having rehearsed this conversation. "What happened between Victor and me? It wasn't planned. It just developed naturally over the course of working together. The connection was—" "Stop." I held up a hand. "I don't need to hear about your connection. I've seen the evidence." Her composure slipped slightly. "Evidence?" I pulled out my phone and scrolled to one of Owen's metadata reports. June 15th, gallery back office, 11:47 p.m. June 22nd, same location, 12:23 a.m. July 3rd, July 10th, July 18th. I looked up at her pale face. Should I continue? "How did you—" She stopped, understanding dawning. "The shared iCloud account. You deleted the conversations but forgot about the photos, and the videos, and the metadata that tracks exactly when and where every image was taken." I set the phone aside. 12 years of marriage, Elena. You'd think you'd know me well enough to remember what I do for a living." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she looked up, the vulnerability was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like relief. "You're right," she said simply. "I've been having an affair with Victor for 6 months. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise." The admission hit harder than I'd expected, even though I'd known it was coming. Knowing something intellectually and hearing it confirmed were apparently two different experiences. "Why?" I asked. "Because he sees me," she said, her voice gaining strength. "He understands my work, my passion for art. He treats me like an equal, not like a wife who happens to have a hobby." "A hobby?" My voice was dangerously quiet. "You think I've treated your career like a hobby? Haven't you?" She leaned forward, animated now. "When was the last time you asked about my work? Really asked, not just, 'How was your day?' while you're scrolling through your phone. When was the last time you came to an opening and actually looked at the art instead of just taking pictures?" "I was there last night." "You were there to spy on me. There's a difference." She wasn't entirely wrong, which made the accusation sting more than it should have. I'd been checked out of our marriage for longer than I cared to admit, going through the motions while my real attention was focused on my photography business and the comfortable routine we'd fallen into. But that didn't excuse what she'd done. "So you decided to find someone who appreciated you more," I said. "How's that working out?" Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She glanced at it and frowned. "It's Victor. He says Jasmine confronted him with some kind of evidence. Financial records or something." She looked up at me with sudden understanding. "You've been working with her?" Misery loves company. Elena's phone rang before she could respond. Victor's name appeared on the screen, and after a moment's hesitation, she answered. "What do you mean she has bank records?" Elena listened for a moment, her face growing pale. "No, I don't think Alex would. Oh, God." She looked at me with something approaching panic. "Victor, I have to call you back." She hung up and set the phone down with shaking hands. "Jasmine knows about the money." "The money you've been paying him?" "Yeah, she knows." "It wasn't like that," Elena said quickly. "He needed help with his studio rent, and I had extra income from the gallery commissions. It was just—" "You were paying him to sleep with you," I interrupted. "Let's call it what it was." "That's not—" She stopped, apparently realizing how it looked from the outside. It wasn't transactional. I was helping someone I cared about. Someone you cared about more than your husband. The accusation hung in the air between us like smoke. Elena's phone buzzed again, then again. Text messages from Victor, probably, as his own confrontation with Jasmine escalated. "What do you want from me, Alex?" Elena asked finally. "An apology? Groveling? What would make you feel better about this?" I considered the question seriously. What did I want? A year ago, I might have said I wanted my marriage back. 6 months ago, I might have been willing to try counseling, to work through whatever had gone wrong between us. But sitting here now, looking at the woman who'd shared my bed for 12 years while planning her escape with another man, I realized what I actually wanted. "I want you to understand what you've lost," I said quietly. "I want you to feel what I felt last night when I watched you toast your perfect creative partner while I sat there like an idiot. I want you to know what it's like to have your life turned upside down by someone you trusted." Elena's phone rang again. This time, it was Sophie. "Don't answer it," I suggested, but Elena was already swiping to accept the call. "Sophie, thank God. Is everything—" Elena's expression changed as she listened. "What do you mean? Everyone's talking about it. Talking about what?" A longer pause. "Online? What's online?" She pulled the phone away from her ear and opened her social media app. I watched her face go through a series of expressions as she scrolled. Confusion, disbelief, horror. "What is it?" I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. Someone posted photos from last night. The dinner, the confrontation. She kept scrolling, her breathing becoming shallow. The comments. Oh God, the comments. She turned the phone toward me, and I saw what Jasmine had been busy with while I was driving home. A carefully curated social media post featuring photos from the gallery opening and the disastrous dinner, accompanied by a caption that told the story of betrayal and public humiliation in just enough detail to be devastating. The comments were brutal. The Portland art scene was small and gossipy, and Elena's colleagues were not being kind about her very public downfall. "She can't do this," Elena whispered. "This will ruin my reputation, my career." "Probably," I agreed. "But then again, you should have thought about that before you decided to have an affair with a married man." Elena's phone rang yet again. This time, the caller ID showed her boss, the gallery owner. She looked at me with desperate eyes. "Alex, please, make it stop. Call off your friend. I'll do anything." "Answer the phone," I suggested. "Let's see what Trent has to say about his star curator's extracurricular activities." Elena stared at the ringing phone like it was a venomous snake. Finally, the call went to voicemail. Immediately, it started ringing again. "He's going to fire me," she said quietly. "Probably," I repeated. "Galleries depend on reputation and discretion. Having your personal drama splashed all over social media isn't exactly good for business." She answered the second call with a shaky voice. "Trent, I can explain—" I couldn't hear his response, but Elena's face told me everything I needed to know. She listened for about 30 seconds, said "I understand" twice, and hung up. "Suspended pending review," she said numbly. "Effective immediately." "That's unfortunate." She looked at me with something approaching hatred. "You're enjoying this." "I'm not enjoying it," I corrected, "but I'm not particularly sorry about it either. Actions have consequences, Elena. You made your choices." My own phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. "Auto Phase 1 complete. Victor's having a meltdown." Gallery owner called him too. Apparently Elena wasn't the only one whose reputation got torched tonight. I showed Elena the message. She read it twice, her face growing paler. "This isn't over," she said, standing up with sudden determination. "You think you can destroy my life and walk away? You have no idea what I'm capable of." "Actually, I think I do," I replied calmly. "I've been married to you for 12 years, remember? I know exactly what you're capable of. The question is, do you know what I'm capable of?" She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, pausing only to look back at me one last time. "This is war, Alex." "No," I said as she opened the door. "This is consequences." After she left, I poured myself a scotch and sat in the gathering darkness of my living room, listening to the silence of my empty house. My phone buzzed periodically with updates from Jasmine and Owen, documenting the escalating fallout from our coordinated attack. Victor had apparently locked himself in his studio and was refusing to answer Jasmine's calls. Elena's social media mentions were multiplying exponentially as the art community discovered the drama. The gallery's phone was ringing off the hook with questions from clients and collectors. By morning, both of their professional reputations would be in ruins. But as I sat there in the dark, I realized this was just the beginning. Elena was right about one thing. This was war, and I intended to win. I woke up the next morning to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The missed calls were mostly from Elena, with a few from numbers I didn't recognize, probably reporters or art world gossips looking for quotes about the scandal. The text messages were a mix of updates from Jasmine and Owen, concerned friends who'd seen the social media posts, and one particularly interesting message from Victor himself. "We need to talk. This has gone too far." I made coffee and scrolled through the overnight developments while Elena's phone calls continued to go to voicemail. Jasmine had been busy. In addition to the social media campaign, she'd apparently spent the night filing paperwork, divorce papers, restraining orders, and asset freezes that would lock Victor out of their joint accounts. Owen had been productive, too. He'd compiled a comprehensive digital dossier of Elena and Victor's affair, complete with time-stamped photos, location data, and financial records showing the money trail. Everything was documented, verified, and legally obtained. My phone rang. This time, it was a number I recognized. Detective Sarah Markson, my former colleague from the police department. "Alex," Sarah's voice was professionally neutral. "I hear you've been having some domestic troubles. News travels fast. It does when it involves public accusations and social media campaigns. I'm calling as a friend, not a cop, but I wanted to make sure you're not doing anything stupid." I appreciated Sarah's concern, but I also knew she was fishing for information. Define stupid. Anything that might require my professional attention. Harassment, stalking, property damage, that sort of thing. "I haven't broken any laws, Sarah. I'm just exercising my right to document my marriage's dissolution." "What about your new friend, the other wife?" "Jasmine, what about her?" "She's been busy. Victor Lane filed a complaint this morning claiming she's harassing him online and interfering with his business relationships." I smiled into my coffee. "Is she?" "Probably. But unless he can prove damages or threats, there's not much we can do about someone telling the truth on social media." Sarah paused. "Just be careful, Alex. Divorce makes people crazy, and crazy people do stupid things." After she hung up, I called Jasmine to give her a heads up about Victor's complaint. "Let him file all the complaints he wants," she said, sounding remarkably cheerful for someone whose marriage had imploded 48 hours ago. "I've got 3 lawyers and a publicist on retainer. Plus, I just had a very interesting conversation with Elena's gallery owner." "Trent? What did he want?" Apparently, Elena wasn't the only one with access to the gallery after hours. Victor's been using the space for his own projects, including some private photography sessions with paying clients. Trent's reviewing the security footage now. I felt a familiar chill. "What kind of photography sessions?" "The kind that might explain why Elena was so eager to help with his financial problems. Turns out your wife has been more involved in Victor's business than either of us realized." Before I could ask for clarification, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Elena standing on my porch, looking like she hadn't slept in days. "I have to go," I told Jasmine. "Elena's here. Be careful. Desperate people make dangerous choices." I opened the door to find my wife holding a manila envelope and wearing an expression I'd never seen before, cold, calculating, and slightly unhinged. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the house. So I gathered from the 17 missed calls. She turned to face me in the living room, holding up the envelope. "This ends now, Alex, all of it. The social media campaign, the financial investigation, whatever else you and that woman are planning." "Or what?" She opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of photographs. "Or these become public." I took the photos and felt my blood turn to ice. They were crime scene images from my police days. Graphic, disturbing photos that I'd taken as part of official investigations. Photos that were supposed to be sealed in evidence files. "Where did you get these?" "Does it matter? The point is, I have them, along with documentation showing that you kept copies of official police evidence for your personal collection." Elena's voice was steady, but I could see the tremor in her hands. "How do you think that would look if it came to light? A police photographer keeping trophy photos of murder scenes?" "Those aren't trophy photos," I said quietly. "They're part of my portfolio from when I was considering freelance forensic work." "Can you prove that? Because from where I'm standing, they look like the kind of thing a disturbed individual might collect, the kind of person who might become dangerous when his marriage falls apart." I stared at the photos, my mind racing. Elena was right. Taken out of context, the images would be devastating to my reputation and potentially criminal. The fact that I'd kept copies of official evidence, even for legitimate professional reasons, was a serious violation of department policy. "You're bluffing," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" She pulled out her phone. "I've already drafted the social media posts. Concerned wife discovers husband's disturbing collection of crime scene photos. I think it has a nice ring to it, don't you? Elena, here's what's going to happen, she continued, her confidence growing. You're going to call off your attack dog, delete the social media posts, stop the financial investigation, and leave Victor alone. In return, these photos stay private, and we handle our divorce like civilized adults. I looked at the woman I'd been married to for 12 years and realized I'd never really known her at all. The Elena I'd fallen in love with wouldn't have been capable of this kind of calculated blackmail. And if I refuse, then by tomorrow morning, everyone in Portland will know that the photographer they hired for their weddings keeps murder scene photos as a hobby. How many clients do you think you'll have left after that? She was right, and we both knew it. In the court of public opinion, perception was reality, and the perception of a photographer with a collection of crime scene photos would be career suicide. But Elena had made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed I was still the same man she'd married, someone who would back down when threatened, someone who valued his reputation more than his principles. You know what, Elena? You're absolutely right. Those photos would be devastating if they became public. I handed them back to her. So you should probably be very careful about where you got them. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and showed her a recording app that had been running since she'd arrived. I mean that you just confessed to stealing police evidence and attempting to blackmail me with it. Both of those are felonies. Elena's face went white. You can't what? Record conversations in my own home? Actually, I can. Oregon's a one-party consent state. I smiled pleasantly. But don't worry, I'll make you a deal. You put those photos back wherever you got them, and I won't send this recording to Detective Markson. You bastard. Now, let's keep this civilized. After all, we're handling our divorce like adults, remember? Elena stared at me for a long moment, clearly trying to figure out if I was bluffing. Finally, she shoved the photos back into the envelope. This isn't over, she said. Actually, it is, at least the part where you had any leverage. I opened the front door for her. Oh, and Elena, next time you want to threaten someone, you might want to make sure you understand what they're capable of first. After she left, I called Jasmine to update her on Elena's attempted blackmail. She's getting desperate, Jasmine observed. That's good. Desperate people make mistakes. What's our next move? I'm meeting with my lawyer this afternoon to finalize the divorce papers. What about you? I looked at the recording of Elena's blackmail attempt on my phone. I think it's time to have a conversation with Victor, man to man. Be careful, Alex. Cornered animals bite. So do photographers. Victor's studio was in a converted warehouse in southeast Portland, the kind of space that artists rented when they couldn't afford anything better, but wanted to maintain the illusion of success. I found him there that evening, sitting among canvases and photography equipment, looking like a man who'd lost everything, which technically he had. Alex. He looked up as I entered, his face showing a mixture of guilt and defiance. I wondered when you'd show up. Victor. I looked around the studio, noting the expensive camera equipment and professional lighting setup. Nice space. Elena's money? He flinched but didn't deny it. What do you want? Just to talk. Man to man. I picked up one of his cameras, a high-end digital model that cost more than most people's cars. You know, I've been thinking about your business model. It's interesting. Art gallery access, expensive equipment, private photography sessions. What exactly do you photograph, Victor? Portraits, artistic nudes. Nothing illegal. I'm sure. But I'm curious about your client list, specifically whether Elena was a client or a business partner. Victor's silence was answer enough. See, here's what I think happened, I continued, setting down the camera. You seduced my wife, convinced her to help finance your little side business, and used her gallery connections to find clients. Elena thought she was supporting your art career, but really she was funding something else entirely. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Because Trent's been reviewing the security footage from the gallery and he's found some very interesting after-hours activities. Activities that might explain why you needed Elena's financial support. Victor stood up abruptly, his composure finally cracking. Elena knew exactly what she was getting into. She wasn't some innocent victim. Maybe not, but she thought she was your only client, didn't she? She thought she was special. The look on Victor's face confirmed my suspicion. Elena hadn't just been funding Victor's business, she'd been participating in it, thinking she was his only model, his artistic muse. She had no idea that she was just another client in his high-end photography operation. How many others were there? I asked. That's none of your business? Actually, it is. Because when this all comes out, and it will come out, Elena's going to realize that she wasn't your creative partner. She was just another customer. I smiled coldly. How do you think she's going to react when she finds out the truth? Victor sank back into his chair, the fight going out of him. What do you want? I want you to disappear. Leave Portland, leave Elena alone, and never contact either of us again. And if I don't, then I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of business you are really running. Your wife, Elena, the art community, the police, everyone. I left Victor sitting in his studio, surrounded by the remnants of his carefully constructed lies. By the time I got home, Jasmine had texted me with an update. Victor just called. He's leaving town tomorrow. Mission accomplished. But as I sat in my empty house that night, I realized our mission was far from over. Elena still didn't know the truth about Victor's business, and when she found out, there would be consequences. The question was, would those consequences be enough, or would I need to take more drastic action to ensure that Elena truly understood what she'd lost? Elena found out about Victor's other clients on a Thursday. I know this because I was the one who told her. She'd been staying at Sophie's apartment since our confrontation, but she still had keys to our house and apparently felt entitled to use them. I came home from a client meeting to find her in my office, going through my files with the systematic thoroughness of someone looking for ammunition. "Find anything interesting?" I asked from the doorway. She spun around, guilt flashing across her face before being replaced by defiance. "I'm looking for my grandmother's jewelry. I know you have it somewhere." "Your grandmother's jewelry is in the safe deposit box where it's been for the past 5 years. You know, the one you have access to?" I leaned against the doorframe, studying her. "What are you really looking for, Elena?" "Nothing. She stopped, apparently realizing that continuing the charade would only make her look more desperate. "Fine. I was looking for anything I could use against you in the divorce proceedings." "And?" "And you're annoyingly clean. No hidden assets, no secret accounts, no evidence of gambling or drinking or any other vices I could exploit." She slammed the file drawer shut. "It's like you've been planning for this for years." "Maybe I have been." The admission hung between us like a challenge. Elena stared at me, trying to read my expression. "What's that supposed to mean?" I walked to my desk and pulled out a manila folder I'd been saving for exactly this moment. "It means I've known about your affair for longer than you think." I opened the folder and spread out a timeline I'd been constructing for months. Credit card statements, phone records, calendar entries, and photographs that documented Elena's relationship with Victor from its very beginning. "March 15th, I said, pointing to the first entry. "That's when you started working late with Victor. March 22nd, first dinner together. April 3rd, first overnight trip to Research Gallery Partnerships in Seattle." Elena's face went pale as she studied the timeline. "You've been spying on me for months?" "I've been documenting the dissolution of our marriage. There's a difference." I pulled out another set of documents. "But here's what I found really interesting. Victor wasn't just cheating on his wife with you. He was cheating on you with other clients." I showed her the photographs Owen had recovered from Victor's cloud storage. Images of Victor with at least 6 different women in various stages of undress, all taken in his studio or at the gallery. Elena stared at the photos, her breathing becoming shallow. "These could be from before we started seeing each other." "Could be, but they're not." I pointed to the metadata timestamps. "This one is from last month. This one from 3 weeks ago. This one from last Tuesday, while you were at Sophie's feeling sorry for yourself." Elena sank into my desk chair, the photos scattered in front of her like evidence at a crime scene. "He said I was special. He said our connection was unique." "You were special. You were the only one paying him." The cruelty of the statement hit its mark. Elena looked up at me with something approaching hatred. "You're enjoying this?" "No," I said honestly. "I'm not enjoying watching you realize that you threw away our marriage for a man who saw you as a business transaction, but I'm not sorry about it either." Elena was quiet for a long moment, studying the photographs with the same analytical eye she brought to gallery curation. When she looked up, something had shifted in her expression. "You want to know the really pathetic part?" she said quietly. "I actually thought he loved me. I thought we had something real." "Elena, no, let me finish." She stood up, gathering the photos into a neat stack. "You want to know why I had the affair? It wasn't because Victor was more attractive or more interesting or better in bed. It was because he made me feel like I mattered, like my thoughts and opinions and dreams were important." "And I didn't?" "When was the last time you asked me about my dreams, Alex? When was the last time we had a conversation about anything more meaningful than grocery lists and weekend plans?" The question hit harder than I'd expected, because she was right. Somewhere along the way, we'd stopped being partners and started being roommates. We'd settled into a comfortable routine that left no room for passion or growth or the kind of deep connection that marriages needed to survive. "That doesn't excuse what you did," I said. "No, it doesn't, but it explains it." Elena walked to the window, looking out at the garden she'd spent years cultivating. I was drowning in our marriage, Alex. And Victor threw me a life preserver. It turned out to be made of lead, but I didn't know that at the time. I joined her at the window, close enough to smell her familiar perfume. For a moment, we stood in silence, looking at the life we'd built together. What happens now? Elena asked. Now we get divorced. We divide our assets, figure out custody arrangements for the house and the business, and try to move on with our lives. That's it? 12 years reduced to paperwork and property division? I turned to look at her, seeing not the manipulative woman who'd tried to blackmail me or the unfaithful wife who'd betrayed our vows, but the person I'd fallen in love with in a coffee shop 12 years ago. What did you expect, Elena? A fight? Tears? Dramatic declarations of love? I expected you to care enough to try to save us. The words hung in the air between us, loaded with years of unspoken resentment and disappointment. I realized that Elena wasn't just talking about the affair. She was talking about all the ways we'd failed each other long before Victor entered the picture. Would you have stopped seeing him if I'd asked? Elena considered the question seriously. I don't know. Maybe. If you'd asked the right way, at the right time, if you'd made me believe that you still saw me as someone worth fighting for. But I didn't. No, you didn't. My phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. Victor's gone. Cleared out his studio this morning and left town. Thought you should know. I showed Elena the message. She read it without expression, then handed my phone back. So that's it then. He's gone, and I'm left to deal with the consequences alone. You made your choice, Elena. We both made choices. She gathered up the photographs and put them back in the folder. I chose to have an affair. You chose to let our marriage die long before that. She was right, and we both knew it. The affair was the symptom, not the disease. Our marriage had been failing for years, and we'd both been too comfortable or too cowardly to address it. What do you want from me? I asked. Nothing. Everything. I don't know. Elena picked up her purse and headed for the door. I want to go back to the beginning and make different choices. But since that's not possible, I guess I want you to remember that we were happy once, before we became strangers living in the same house. She paused at the door, looking back at me one last time. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just about Victor, but about all of it. About the way we let what we had slip away without a fight. After she left, I sat in my office surrounded by the evidence of our failed marriage, photographs, timelines, bank statements, and legal documents that reduced 12 years to a collection of facts and figures. My phone rang. It was Jasmine. How did she take it? She asked. Better than I expected, worse than I hoped. Any regrets? I considered the question. Did I regret exposing the affair? No. Did I regret the systematic destruction of Elena's reputation and career? Probably not. Did I regret the way our marriage had ended? Not with passion or drama, but with the quiet acknowledgement of mutual failure? Ask me again in a year, I said. Fair enough. What's next for you? I looked around my empty house, thinking about the future that stretched ahead of me. Divorce proceedings, division of assets, the slow process of rebuilding a life that had been defined by partnership for more than a decade. I don't know, I admitted. Figure out how to be single again, I guess. What about you? Same, though I'm thinking of starting a consulting business. Turns out I'm pretty good at reputation management. I laughed despite everything. That's one way to put it. After we hung up, I poured myself a scotch and sat in the gathering darkness of my living room, listening to the silence of my empty house. Tomorrow, I would call a lawyer and start the formal divorce proceedings. I would begin the process of untangling 12 years of shared life, dividing memories along with assets. But tonight, I allowed myself to mourn what we'd lost. Not just the marriage that had ended, but the marriage that might have been if we'd both been brave enough to fight for it before it was too late. Elena was right about one thing. We had been happy once, and maybe, in the end, that was enough. 6 months later, I was photographing a wedding at the Portland Art Museum when I saw Elena across the gallery. She was standing in front of a contemporary sculpture, wearing a simple black dress that I didn't recognize, her hair shorter than she'd worn it in years. She looked different, thinner, more angular, like someone who'd been refined by fire. She saw me at the same moment, and for a heartbeat, we just stared at each other across the crowded reception. Then she smiled, not the practiced social smile she'd perfected for gallery openings, but something smaller and more genuine, and raised her champagne glass in a subtle toast. I nodded back and returned to photographing the bride and groom, but I was aware of Elena's presence for the rest of the evening. She didn't approach me, and I didn't seek her out, but there was something oddly comforting about sharing the same space without drama or recrimination. The The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. As promised, it had been civilized. No contested assets, no bitter custody battles over our shared possessions, just the methodical division of a life that had been built for two. Elena kept the house. I kept the photography business. We split the savings and went our separate ways. I'd heard through mutual friends that she'd found work at a gallery in Seattle, starting over in a new city where her reputation hadn't been completely destroyed. Jasmine had moved to San Francisco and was indeed running a successful reputation management firm, specializing in helping people rebuild their lives after public scandals. As for Victor, he'd disappeared completely. His social media accounts were deleted, his studio abandoned, and his wife had gotten an uncontested divorce along with most of his remaining assets. He'd simply vanished, leaving behind a trail of broken relationships and unpaid debts. After the wedding reception ended, I was packing my equipment when Elena appeared beside me. "Beautiful ceremony," she said, helping me coil a lighting cable without being asked. "It was. The bride's an art teacher, and the groom's a musician. They wanted something creative but classic. Sounds like your kind of clients." We worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, falling back into the easy partnership that had defined the early years of our marriage. It was strange how familiar the rhythm felt, even after everything that had happened. "How's Seattle?" I asked. "Good. Different. The gallery scene is more commercial than Portland, but I'm learning to adapt." She handed me the coiled cable. "What about you? Business doing well?" "Can't complain. Turns out there's something to be said for being known as the photographer who documents the truth, even when it's uncomfortable." Elena winced slightly. "I suppose I deserve that." "I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about my reputation in general. But since you brought it up," I studied her face, looking for signs of the woman who'd tried to blackmail me with stolen police photos. "How are you doing? Really?" "Better. Therapy helps. Turns out I had some issues to work through that went deeper than just our marriage." She paused, then added quietly, "I'm sorry, Alex. For all of it. The affair, the blackmail attempt, the way I tried to blame you for my choices. I'm sorry, too, for checking out of our marriage long before you had the affair, for being so focused on being right that I forgot to try to save what we had." We looked at each other for a moment, two people who'd loved each other once and had learned too late how to be honest. "Do you think we could have made it work?" Elena asked. "If we'd both tried harder, been more honest, fought for us instead of against each other?" I considered the question seriously. Maybe. In another timeline, with different choices, we might have figured out how to be partners instead of roommates. But not in this one. No, not in this one. Elena nodded, accepting the finality of it. For what it's worth, I think we're both better people apart than we were together at the end. She was right. The divorce had forced both of us to confront parts of ourselves we'd been avoiding. I'd had to acknowledge my own role in our marriage's failure, while Elena had been forced to face the consequences of her choices and rebuild her life from scratch. "I should go," Elena said, glancing around the emptying gallery. "I just wanted to say hello, and to tell you that I'm glad you're doing well." "Elena." I called her name as she started to walk away. "For what it's worth, I hope Seattle works out for you. I hope you find what you're looking for." "Thanks. I hope you do too." I watched her leave, noting the confident set of her shoulders, the way she moved through the crowd with purpose rather than the desperate need for validation that had characterized her final months in Portland. Whatever else had happened, Elena had survived the destruction of her old life and was building something new. As I finished packing my equipment, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us both to this point. The affair, the revenge, the systematic destruction of reputations and relationships. All of it had seemed so important at the time, so necessary and justified. But standing in the art museum where Elena and I had attended our first gallery opening together as newlyweds, I realized that the most important part of the whole experience hadn't been the revenge or the vindication. It had been the recognition that sometimes people grow apart despite loving each other, and sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let them go. My phone buzzed. Engagement shoot confirmed. The young couple reminded me of Elena and myself. Hopeful, certain love conquers all. That night, I toasted the empty room. Thank you, Elena, for 12 years and for showing me endings birth beginnings. I deleted all evidence files. The past released. 6 months later, Sarah, a journalist, hired me. Smart, funny, unimpressed by my reputation. Over coffee, she asked if I'd talk endlessly about my ex. God, I hope not. 3 years post-divorce, a couple requested me. We want truth documented, even uncomfortable parts. I gave them my card, watching them walk away. I capture honesty amid beautiful lies, finding peace between hope and reality. Sometimes they're the same.